Hello, Michael here with another Redshift tutorial. Today we're going to be having a look at Xgen in Redshift and how to use the RS hair shader. So to use Xgen, if you've already tried this and you're having some issues, one of the first things I recommend to people is to create your project and save your scene before you do anything. And if that's still not working, make sure you've done it in your default directory in your C drive. You can see my path there. It's just in my documents/Maya. If that doesn't work still, you can always try the desktop. Sometimes Xgen doesn't like to path correctly due to permissions and things on your computer, so that may solve your problem if you create a project on your desktop. But if you're not having any of those problems, then everything should be fine. So in this scene, I've got a key light, I've got a dome light, and I've got a sphere, and the sphere is going to be what we're going to be applying to our Xgen to. So we're going to go up to the shelf here and click the Xgen button. And we're going to select our sphere and create new description. We'll call this shoot, and we'll call it a description. I'm going to make this fur, so I'll just call it fur 1. We're going to use groom rule splines, and everything else is fine. We'll click create. So if it's worked correctly, you should be seeing these guides. And if you refresh it with the eye with the little tick button, you'll see the actual sort of geometry that is going to be the hair. So if we just run a quick IPR, you'll see that that is how it is functioning currently. But we can obviously make this look a little bit better. At the moment, it actually doesn't have a Redshift material applied to it, so let's create one. So in the Hypershade editor, we're going to select Redshift surface under the shader tab. We use a tab, and I think it's RS hair. No, what if we just type in hair? Redshift hair. Alright, and we'll get something that looks like that, and we're just going to call this RS Fur 1, and now we want to assign that shader to our fur. So to do that, we're going to go to, in the Xgen tab, we're going to go to Preview Output, and then scroll down to Output Settings and change it to Redshift, and then we're going to just select our fur description. With the Hypershade editor, we're going to hold down right click and assign that material, and then when we IPR, you'll see that it shifted to the standard color of the hair, which is just that sort of light brown. So we'll take this a bit further again. So generally when I'm sort of starting out with fur, you can use the density on the primitives tab, but generally I keep it at 1.0. I'm going to reduce the width down and just sort of give it a bit of taper. You could slide the taper up as well, but I sort of prefer to do it this way to just get a bit more control. So if I refresh that now, you can see that the hair is sort of thin but thick at the bottom. We can go to grooming, and then we can increase the density to say 500, which will make it look like that. If I refresh that and remove the visibility of the guides, then you'll actually be able to see what the hair looks like. So it looks like that. Generally I keep the guides on. You can even turn the primitive view off if you wish, just using that. Then just for a bit of fun, we'll go to modifiers. This is one that I like to do, especially on fur. This is just sort of basic one that you can do, just use noise, and then we can view that. I might just turn visibility or grooming off, so it just gives us a bit of sort of messiness to the fur, which generally looks a little bit better. And then if we IPR that, you'll see that you get a nice furry ball. So yeah, that's pretty straightforward. So that's how you assign it. I'm not going to go into grooming and all that sort of stuff. That would be a completely separate tutorial if I ever decide to do it. But I will go into the shader. So select your shader in the Hypershade editor, and then you can either use the attribute editor if you wish or whatever. So I'll use the attribute editor here so you can see what's happening in the render. I'll just leave the render in IPR mode. The first thing is internal reflection. This is going to define the main color of your hair shader. So if I change this to say blue, you'll see that the hair now appears blue. For this tutorial, I'm just going to keep it on the default color so I can show you a couple of things. The next thing is weight. This defines the weight of this channel. So you've got 3 main channels that you use: the internal reflection, the diffuse, and the transmission. As you mix in more diffuse, it sort of nullifies the transmission. So your diffuse would have to be less than transmission for it to actually have an effect, the transmission to have an effect. So the weight is just going to increase the weight of the internal reflection, so obviously it sort of works as a multiplier, as you can see. I'm going to keep that at 0.5 though. Glossiness can be used, is obviously sort of how reflective it is. It can also be used to make it look wet. So as I increase that to 1.0, you'll see that it sort of darkens toward the root particularly. This is also to do with how the transmission's working, but if you've got it set like this is a good way to sort of get the hair to look a little bit denser and wetter. Alright, I'm going to set that back to 0.5. So if we increase the weight of the diffuse channel now, you'll see that the internal reflection and the transmission become a lot less important, and it's starting to just basically reflect the light off the surface. This could be useful for more types of fur that don't actually have much transmission, so maybe like a shag carpet or something like that, or if you're looking for something a little bit softer looking, then that's also sort of the effect that you might be after. And translucency weight is just obviously how translucent the fur appears to be. This effect is most notable when you've got a light behind your subject, so it might be a bit hot, but you'll see that it's sort of translucent. Sorry, because of the white background this is hard to see, but it is translucent toward the light side of the edge there. So I'll set the diffuse back to 0. So transmission, once again, color is just literally the color of the transmission. So transmission is defining the color of the light escaping through the back side of the piece of hair that is being affected. So if I change this to blue, and where is it? Increase the weight, you'll see because of the transmission it's sort of becoming darker at the center there. I might be able to see if I get the light in a bit better. Yeah, so you can see it on the edge there. We're starting to get that blue, which is the transmission. Light being transmitted through the hair essentially. And length glossiness and width glossiness essentially just control the glossiness on those vectors. So length being longitudinal and width being sort of lateral. So generally the default settings are fine for most things. If you're looking for like a more slick hair, you might want to reduce the width gloss or increase it to maybe 0.6 and then, you know, higher on that. But I'd have to actually have the fur quite a lot longer and quite a lot glossier for you to be able to see it. So unfortunately I'm not going to be able to show you exactly how that works, but that should be pretty self-explanatory. And finally we've got primary reflection. So this is just the color of, this is like your reflection lobe, as in any of your other shaders that you use in Redshift. So just the color of the specularity essentially. So if I change it to red, you'll start seeing some red specular highlights, and I just have to increase the weight for you to be able to see it a whole lot. And obviously that looks silly, but that is how it functions. Glossiness is just the glossiness of the effect. So whether or not you want it to be highly glossy or sort of as you go down lower, more rough in appearance. So you can see that's starting to look a lot more rough as I move it down to 0.1. And then samples, if you want to increase the sample weight, if you're getting a little bit of noise, you can also affect the highlight only. Angular shift, I generally just don't bother changing. The most you're going to change it sort of is going to be between -10 and -5. According to the docs, I've found that -5 is fine for for pretty much everything that I've ever done with it. And finally, you got enable Fresnel if you want to have the Fresnel highlight. And finally, you got IOR, which is your index of refraction. 1.55 is the recommended index of refraction. I think it's the index of refraction the same as glass, essentially. So that's sort of the physical property of the light passing through the hair, how much of the light is going to bend as it passes through. Transparency, I generally wouldn't mess with. If you increase it, it's going to be more transparent hair, but this is going to increase the noise and render time significantly. For balanced diffuse reflection energy, this is, if you want it to be physically correct, you would have this on. If you turn it off, essentially it's going to mean that the reflection won't affect the diffuse lighting strength. Enable trace depth override will just enable the max reflection / refraction trace depth. So if you have those set up, then it will defer to those. Otherwise, it will just go with the default. So as you can see, by enabling that, I can now increase the maximum trace depth. This will start to increase the render time though as well. Cutoff override is going to override the global threshold. So if you want it to cut off sooner or later, then you can increase that or decrease that. By default, it's off, and that's generally how I keep it. And with transparency, like I said, I don't really recommend using it because it's going to increase your render time. If you want a transparency cutoff, you can enable that and then sort of balance out your render time with it. But I would pretty much just stick with the default for 90% of everything, if not 99.9%. So yeah, that is actually pretty much all there is to it, though. It's fairly straightforward in Redshift to get it going and up and started, and the hair looks really nice off the bat. It doesn't take very long to render it at all. It's very quick, which is always favorable, and you can sort of viz dev a lot quicker than you can in a lot of other renderers, which generally I will always defer to Redshift when I'm doing fur if I have to. I'm not a big fan of fur, but if I have to do it, I will defer to Redshift because it just renders so fast. But that's it for this tutorial. I hope you liked it. If you did, make sure you click the like button so other people on Facebook can find it. And if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed, as I do a couple of tutorials every week for things like this, Redshift, and other CG products. If you would like to stay up to date further, you can check out the Facebook page, link in the description. That's it for now though. Thank you very much for watching, and happy rendering.